Have you ever noticed that at the very start, DiCaprio's character is literally just an ordinary guy? Like, really normal. He just comes to the stock exchange to get a job, everything looks fine, and then the temptations start rolling in. 1, 2, 3, and suddenly he's not even the same person anymore. And, I keep thinking, even if you're a Christian, would you actually handle that kind of money, fame, attention from women? Because a lot of people fall right there, even well-known pastors. Honestly, I was shocked by the recent scandals with pastors from the US and Australia. Hey, I'm Sarah. I live in Thailand now, just walking around these streets. And, while I'm out here, I really want to talk about something Christians actually need to pay attention to. This movie, it works like a warning. Because honestly, what they show in this film, that's real life. Harsh, ugly reality. Lies, corruption, sexual temptation, all of that is around us, around our kids. We can pretend it's far away, but it's better to look it straight in the face. Hit subscribe and let's get started. I keep thinking about how temptation never looks scary at first. It's always kind of soft, almost friendly, right? And Belfort, the guy DiCaprio plays, in the beginning, he's just a normal dude showing up for a job, nothing wild. But then that older guy gives him one tiny piece of advice and everything shifts. Ever had someone like that around you? Someone who says something small but nudges you off track? Honestly, it's crazy how one quiet voice can redirect your whole path. That's why we gotta stay awake, even when things look harmless. There's this thought. Whoever thinks he's standing strong should be careful. And honestly, that hits hard, right? Because we all feel steady until something shakes us. Ever had that moment where you thought, yeah, I'm fine, and then suddenly you're not? Jesus warned his disciples to stay awake, to be ready. Why would he say that if falling wasn't real for all of us? It makes me wonder, how many temptations look small at first? And are we truly watching our hearts like we think we are? Sometimes I'm just like, why does everything start with something so tiny? It's always like a little thing you don't even think about, and then boom, it's too late. Belfort didn't plan on becoming that guy. He just said yes to something small, something that kind of felt harmless. And that tiny yes pulls another yes, and then another, and suddenly you're way off from where you started. That first moment is the one we never notice. Maybe because it feels comfortable. Maybe because it just, fits the mood. Ever had that happen? If you want to share, you can. Sometimes someone's story helps someone else see their own blind spot. It's wild how sometimes everything starts not with something big, but with something tiny. One choice, one moment. Ever looked back and realized that the turning point was smaller than you expected? Belfort didn't jump into chaos. He slid into it, slowly, quietly. And honestly, isn't that how it usually happens to us too? You think it's nothing, and then suddenly life feels heavier. That's why paying attention to the little things matters. They build directions long before we notice the road. I keep wondering why sin always shows up smiling first. Like, it never introduces itself honestly. Fast money, easy pleasure, little thrills, they all look harmless in the beginning. Ever felt that? When something feels exciting but something inside you goes, well, this might be dangerous. Belfort chased the rush, and it chained him. And the truth is, anything we chase without God can do the same to us. That's why we got to ask ourselves what really pulls our hearts today. People get used to small evil really easily. It doesn't look like evil at first. It feels like comfort, like something that just helps you breathe for a moment. Belfort did that too. A little step here, a tiny step there, and then that little habit starts, like telling him what to do. We're the same sometimes. We let some small thing sit in our hearts and it grows roots. And we go, yeah, I'm fine, I'm in control. But then suddenly it's the thing controlling us. Ever felt something just kind of latch onto your life like that? It's scary, honestly, because the small stuff is the hardest to notice. And, well, the quiet stuff is usually the stuff that destroys people. There are moments, and I know you've had them, when temptation feels almost beautiful. Like it whispers, you deserve this, it's fine, nobody will know. Ever heard that voice? It's scary how gentle it sounds. Belfort listened, and step by step he lost control. Honestly, how many times do we ignore tiny warnings because the moment feels good? That's why the real battle starts long before the fall. It starts in the heart, in small thoughts, in quiet desires we don't bring to God. Temptation hits hardest when you're tired or disappointed. That's when it feels kind of reasonable. With Belfort, he wanted more, wanted to prove something, wanted to feel big. And that's exactly when the wrong door opened. We're like that too, right? We want quick answers, quick success, quick relief. And yeah, that's when we're the weakest. That's why the Bible talks so much about patience and guarding your heart. Because when you're worn out, you'll believe anything that promises a shortcut. And shortcuts, like always, cost more than the long road. I mean, always. What really gets me is how sin pretends to be opportunity. You start telling yourself this is progress. This is a good move. Belfort kept saying that to himself. And we do the same thing. But those opportunities always ask you to, silence your conscience a bit. Just a little, even though your conscience never talks for no reason. That weird little discomfort in your chest, that's God protecting you. Ever had everything look perfect on the outside, but your heart felt kind of wrong? That feeling isn't random. It's a holy warning wrapped in quiet. And yeah, it saves people more than they realize. It's funny, we hate admitting we're weak. We really don't want to feel vulnerable. We want to look strong, put together, yeah, I got this. But the Bible teaches the opposite. It teaches us to be honest with God, to say, I need you, I could fall. And the older you get, the more you see, admitting weakness is actually strength. Belfort never did that. He kept trying to be the guy who's in control. And that's exactly why he crashed. Because when a person tries to be his own God, the ending is always the same. Always off. The scary thing about falling is you don't feel like you're falling. The free fall feels kind of amazing at first. Like Belfort, luxury, applause, parties, attention. And even when everything was falling apart, he kept smiling yeah, it's fine. But inside, he was already empty. And people can look totally okay on the outside while their heart is breaking quietly. That's why we got to be kinder to each other. Sometimes one soft word can literally stop someone from making a terrible choice. And so, yeah, you never know who needs that word right now. And after everything, I keep asking myself, who's actually influencing us today? And our kids? And the people we love? Because Belfort didn't fall because of money. He fell because of one person he listened to on day one. And we all have voices like that around us. Some are close, some are online, some are loud inside our heads. And we don't even notice how someone else's voice starts shaping our decisions. That's why the real question is, who are we letting speak into our hearts? Whose voice is guiding us right now? Because that voice is either pulling us toward the light or leading us straight into a pit. And honestly, yeah, that's just how life works. I keep thinking about how the most dangerous stuff never shows up looking dangerous. It always kind of slips in quietly, right? A tiny yes here, a tiny moment there. And honestly, you don't even notice it at first. Ever had that feeling where later you look back and go, well, that's where it started? That's how temptation works. It doesn't feel big, it feels small, harmless, almost friendly. But that's the moment we should be watching the closest, because that's where the whole direction of a life quietly shifts. So, if you look at the movie, Belfort didn't just jump into chaos, right? He didn't wake up and go, I want to ruin my life today. No, he just said this one small, yeah, okay, to fast money. And money, it always looks so shiny, so easy, like it's promising something. And you kind of think, well, just this once, what's the harm? Have you ever told yourself that? I mean, that phrase, just once, is literally the most dangerous door you can open. Because once is never once, right? And in the movie, you can totally see it. One soft yes, and the whole thing opens up like a hallway you didn't mean to enter. And then, yeah, it closes behind you. What really hits me is how a small yes almost never looks like something wrong. It looks like a chance, like a blessing even. And you start thinking, why not? What's the big deal, right? Ever been in that spot? Temptation never walks in looking like trouble. It comes dressed like opportunity. And because of that, we relax. And once you relax, you stop checking the consequences. It's like this subtle psychological trap that works on, everyone. And honestly, people usually figure out they messed up only when they're already way too far down the road. And by then, well, it's kind of late. Have you ever felt something was off inside, but you still went along with it? That small, uncomfortable feeling you push away because you just want things to be simple and not, dramatic. And you tell yourself, well, it's fine. Nothing bad will happen. but that nothing grows, always. Ever had that? In the movie, it's so clear. Belfort wasn't evil. He just ignored that little signal in his heart. And we do that too, right? We close our eyes because, yeah, sometimes it's just easier not to see. And honestly, that's probably one of the most dangerous places to be. When you know, but you walk forward anyway. When a person takes that tiny step, that micro, yes, the door opens. Like wide open opens. Temptation doesn't break the door down. It just waits until you open it. And then it walks in quiet and confident, like it owns the place. Ever notice that real trouble shows up, not with noise, but with stillness? Like the softest moment? And you don't even realize you let something into your heart. Has that ever happened to you? When you look back and think, wow, something flipped, but I didn't see it. And later people say, I don't even know how this started. But deep down, yeah, it started with that quiet yes. The Bible talks about this so clearly in the story of Esau. It's honestly wild how accurate it is. A bowl of stew, a tiny comfort, a moment of relief. And the cost? His whole future. I mean, can you imagine giving up something huge because you were tired? Ever thought about that? That's how temptation works. It doesn't show you the cost first. It shows you the warm, easy thing in front of you. And yeah, the bill comes later. And we do the same thing, trading something precious for a moment of ease. And every time, it starts with a small yes. Esau wasn't thinking, wow, I'm about to lose everything. He was just tired, hungry, overwhelmed. And that's like so us, right? We want something quick to make the pain stop. A little comfort, a little relief, and that's the moment we're the weakest. Ever notice that? When you're exhausted, you say yes to things you'd never touch on a clear, peaceful day. And honestly, that's why people lose what matters. Not because they're bad, but because they're worn down. And that's exactly when temptation brings its prettiest offer. And look, the fast money in the movie is basically the same stew. It looks bright, warm, kinda delicious, and he grabs it. And sometimes we grab our own version of something that looks good because we want the quick fix. Has something like that ever happened to you? Where something beautiful turned out to be a trap? If you feel like it, you can tell about it in the comments. I mean, sometimes one honest story keeps someone else from falling into the same mess. We all had our stew moments. Yeah, all of us. So I once read about this young broker, just a super talented kid, kind of bright, kind of sharp, like the type everyone says has a big future. And he came from this really normal, simple family, nothing fancy. And one day someone offered him this tiny little dishonest move, just a little thing. You know how people say, yeah, everybody does it. Nothing's going to happen. Just try it once. And honestly, that line is almost always the trap. And he was like, well, all right, why not? And that was it. That was the moment everything started slipping. Then came another, yes, and then another. And he didn't even notice how fast he was going down. I mean, he ended up losing his job, like everything he worked for. His reputation just collapsed. His parents kind of stepped back from him. And his wife, yeah, she filed for divorce. And the wildest part is that none of this started with something big. It all started with this tiny, tiny choice. Doesn't that sound familiar somehow? People today ruin their whole futures from one moment that feels small. And danger, almost never looks dangerous. It looks like a chance, like an opportunity. And that's what makes it so sneaky. That's why, even the small stuff matters so much more than we think. You ever notice how the biggest disasters in life often start with something tiny? Like, not a huge fall, but one quick decision. And honestly, we almost never think about those moments. We just go, yeah, whatever, it's fine. But is it? Because sometimes that one step becomes a habit, and that habit becomes a whole new path. Ever looked back and thought, how did this get so big? It's wild how the small stuff grows when we're not paying attention. That's why those little yes decisions matter way more than we think. So here's what I keep asking myself. If life can turn from one tiny choice, then what choices am I making without thinking? And honestly, what choices are you making? Ever felt like something small was pulling you in a direction you didn't plan? Maybe that's the moment to slow down and ask what's really guiding you. Because the real question isn't how big the temptation is. It's who we're listening to. And sometimes one pause, one prayer, one no changes the whole story. Sometimes the dangerous stuff in life doesn't look dangerous at all. It's like soft, warm, kind of comforting even. And you're standing there thinking everything's fine, right? Have you ever felt that when a person is so nice that you don't even imagine anything could go wrong? And honestly, that's exactly when people let their guard down. You stop listening to that little warning inside, And later you're like, well, why didn't I notice this earlier? But that's how it works. Temptation almost never shows up looking scary. It usually comes wrapped in like a smile. So in the movie, it hits you right away. Naomi walks in looking like a dream, bright, confident, gorgeous, like the whole package. And I mean, what guy is thinking straight in a moment like that, right? You ever notice how a beautiful picture can shut off a man's logic? And honestly, Belfort just drifts. He doesn't even fight it. And we've all seen that, haven't we? When someone gets so blinded by the outside that they don't even see what it's doing to their life. The thing with temptation through people is that it almost always feels like a gift at first. Like, wow, this is so good, maybe God even sent it. But have you ever had that moment where something looks too perfect and you're like, is this really from God or is this like a test? And honestly, we usually don't want to ask that question. We just want to believe it's a blessing. But deep down, something whispers, well, be careful. And if we don't listen, the price can be pretty heavy later. And with men, it gets even trickier. A woman smiles and boom, part of his brain just kind of shuts off. Have you seen that happen? Or maybe you've been around someone who totally stopped thinking once emotions kicked in. In the movie, it's so obvious. Belfort stops seeing clearly the second Naomi shows up. And honestly, that's how strong influence can be. We underestimate it all the time, especially when it comes wrapped in beauty. The Bible gives us this whole story with Samson for a reason. I mean, the strongest man of his time fell because of a relationship. Not an army, not a battle, not some disaster. A woman. And doesn't that make you think? If someone that strong could miss the signals, what about us? Maybe discernment is a different kind of strength, And it kind of shows how even the strongest people can fall if they can't see who's pulling them down. And Samson didn't fall right away. That's the scary part. It started slowly, quietly, just emotions first. You ever felt that? When your heart is dragging you one way while your mind is saying, well, this might not be right. That's exactly the danger zone. And in the movie, it's the same thing. That soft romantic pull that makes a strong person, weaker without even noticing it. And honestly, that's how a lot of people slip today too. Not from something huge, but from something that felt sweet. When you look at the movie, Naomi is kind of like this modern Delilah. Bright, shiny, beautiful, all wrapped up in this vibe that just pulls you in. And honestly, nothing about her looks dangerous at first, right? That's the scary part. Temptation today doesn't come looking dark or evil. It comes looking like everything you ever wanted. And have you noticed how the prettiest things in life can sometimes lead you the furthest away from where you need to be? It's wild how beauty can shut down caution. And by the time you realize something's off, you're already way too far inside the story. So I once knew this man, a good one, really solid spiritually. And everything started with this tiny bit of attention from a woman. Just warmth, Nothing big, nothing extreme. And he didn't even think twice. Have you ever felt that when something seems too small to worry about? And you're like, well, what harm could this possibly do? But honestly, that's exactly where it begins. Those tiny innocent moments that feel safe. And somehow they start shifting your heart before you even notice. It's kind of scary how quiet temptation can be. And then, everything picks up speed. He started lying, started hiding things, started calling passion love. You ever seen someone do that? Or maybe you felt it yourself when your emotions get so loud that God's voice feels kind of quiet in comparison. And you're standing there thinking, well, maybe it's fine, even though deep down you know it's not. That's the dangerous moment, when you stop checking where your heart is taking you. And honestly, that's how people fall most of the time. Not because they want to, but because they stop hearing the truth. You ever notice how wrong relationships always take something from you? Always. Peace, clarity, focus, honesty, they all start slipping away. And the person becomes kind of weaker inside, Not physically, but spiritually. You ever looked at someone and thought they don't even look like themselves anymore? Love isn't supposed to erase you. And honestly, if something or someone makes you smaller instead of stronger, that's not love. That's a slow trap, a quiet one, the kind you don't see until it's almost too late. Why is temptation through people so strong? Maybe because we want connection, right? We want attention, affection, someone to tell us we matter. And sometimes that desire is like stronger than wisdom. Have you felt that before? When your heart is pulling you somewhere your mind would never go? And it's strange how often the biggest spiritual problems come not from big crises, but from relationships that feel sweet in the beginning. Honestly, no one is fully safe from that. Not men, not women. Because when your heart gets involved, you kind of stop watching where you're walking. So, this is the moment to ask yourself something real. Is there someone in your life who's pulling you somewhere you shouldn't be going? Someone who seems warm, kind, maybe even loving, but makes you spiritually weaker? You ever felt that quiet warning inside? That little pause that says, well, something's not right here? We ignore that voice so often. But honestly, recognizing the wrong person next to you is already the first step to freedom. The first step to getting your heart back where it belongs. You know, the scariest thing is when a person kind of stops being afraid. Like when fear just disappears. Have you seen that happen? When someone acts like nothing can touch them, nothing can hurt them. And honestly, that's usually the moment when everything starts falling apart. Why do we, sometimes think we're completely untouchable? Where does that weird confidence even come from? It's wild how people walk straight into danger and even smile doing it. Ever watched someone do that and thought, right, this is not going to end well? And the strange part is they don't even notice the chaos forming around them. They think they're in control, but they're really not. In the movie, you can totally feel it. Belfort wasn't really hooked on money. He was hooked on the rush. You know that feeling, that adrenaline, that thrill, like he needed something stronger every time? Have you met people like that? Who can't live in peace because they always need something extreme to feel alive? And they keep saying, well, I just like the excitement. But is it excitement or like a quiet addiction to chaos? Ever had someone in your life who keeps running toward risky stuff and calling it fun? And honestly, you just know they're losing control, even if they don't see it yet. And then, it gets worse when those substances show up. The illegal stuff, the pills, the things people think they can handle. Have you ever looked at someone under that kind of influence and thought they're not even themselves right now? Why do people believe they can control something that literally controls them? There's this strange confidence people get like, well, nothing will happen to me. You ever felt that kind of false safety before? It's crazy how fast someone can lose themselves completely. It starts quiet and ends painfully loud. And sometimes by the time they notice, it's way too late. And then comes the storm. It always comes. In the movie, that yacht scene, you remember? The waves, the wind, the panic. It's almost like God himself is saying, hey, stop. Have you ever felt that in your own life when everything suddenly shakes and you're like, why is this happening right now? Deep down, you kind of know it's not random. But why do we only understand things when they hit this hard? Why do we fight for control even when the storm already swallowed the wheel? That whole moment in the film reminds me so much of Jonah. He also thought everything was under his control, running, resisting, doing things his own way. And then the storm hit. Ever thought about how some storms in our lives aren't accidents at all? What if they're the only way to stop us from running? Have you ever had that moment when everything suddenly collapses and you're like, okay, something bigger is talking to me right now? And honestly, without that storm, would Jonah have even turned around? Would we? Jonah's storm wasn't destruction. It was a warning, a wake-up call. Have you ever felt life suddenly shaking like that? When everything goes wrong at the same time and you're asking yourself, why now? What if it's not punishment but mercy? What if without that shake, you'd never notice where you're headed? Ever ignored warning signs until they got too loud to avoid? It's strange how life sometimes has to hit us hard just to get us to slow down. And yeah, it usually works, even if it hurts. Belfort didn't get the warning either. He kind of laughed at danger, right? Have you seen people like that? The ones who act like nothing bad can ever touch them? And honestly, it's scary because you're watching them walk straight toward a cliff like everything's fine. Why do some people lose that basic survival instinct? Ever tried telling someone, hey, this looks dangerous, and they just shrug it off? And the crazier the situation gets, the more they pretend they're in control. But are they really? Or is it just like denial with a confident smile? It's wild how a person can be sinking and still act like they're floating. So, I once knew this guy, and he was like a really good guy. quiet, stable, even kind of disciplined spiritually. And everything started with some light stuff, those so-called harmless things people say won't do anything. Ever heard someone say it's just to relax or it's just once? And you're standing there thinking, right, that's exactly how it begins. He thought he could control it. Everyone thinks that at first. But honestly, little habits grow fast. Have you ever watched someone change slowly, like day by day, until one day you realize they're not the same person anymore? It's heartbreaking how silent that transformation can be. The scariest part was that he truly believed nobody noticed. Like, he thought he was hiding everything. You ever seen someone do that? When the whole world sees the problem, but the person doesn't, and they keep making excuses, those little stories like, I'm fine, or it's nothing. Why do people defend the very thing that's destroying them? Have you ever tried telling someone the truth and they just kind of shut down? It's like the more you try to reach them, the deeper they go into denial. And honestly, when the mind gets blinded, seeing reality becomes almost impossible. And then one day his storm hit. The kind you can't ignore or pretend away. Legal trouble, family falling apart, health collapsing. You ever seen a person reach that point where everything falls at once? And that's when he finally started asking the questions he should have asked years earlier. Why do we wait until everything breaks? Why not listen earlier? It's painful to watch someone hit the bottom before they understand the direction they were heading. And, sometimes the bottom becomes the loudest teacher they were heading. Storms often show up as chances, not punishments. Have you ever felt that? When life shakes you so hard you can't pretend anymore, and suddenly you're faced with a choice. Keep chasing the rush or stop and breathe for once. Why do people only understand the truth when it hurts? Maybe because before that moment, everything inside them was too loud. You know that feeling? When life's noise drowns out God's whisper? And honestly, storms don't break us as much as they wake us up. Sometimes they're the only thing strong enough to get our attention. So here's the question that matters. What storms are already warning you? You ever felt that nudge inside like, hey, something's not right here? Maybe things around you are already shaking a bit. Maybe circumstances feel off. And, why do we ignore those signs? Have you ever pushed through something even though every part of you was saying stop? What do you think happens if you keep going anyway? Sometimes one honest moment can save a whole life, if you let it. It always amazes me how people fall in love with charisma. They don't even think twice about what's going on inside the person. Have you noticed that? Someone walks into a room and suddenly everybody's, impressed. And no one asks what kind of character they actually have. Why do we do that? Why do we trust brightness more than depth? Ever met someone who looked so confident, so put together, and later you were like, well, that wasn't the whole picture at all? It's kind of crazy how easily we get blinded by the shine. And honestly, a lot of trouble starts exactly there. In the movie, it's so obvious. Belfort isn't just selling something, he's leading a whole crowd. And they look at him like he's some kind of answer. You ever seen that? When a person talks so confidently that everyone else stops thinking for themselves, why do we give up our own judgment so fast? And the wildest part is that nobody asks where this person is actually taking them. Ever followed someone just because they sounded sure? And later you think, right, maybe I should have checked that path myself. It happens way more than we admit. Charisma creates this illusion that someone knows exactly what they're doing. You know what I mean? They speak nicely, move confidently, promise boldly, and suddenly people believe every word. But have you ever paused and asked yourself what kind of character stands behind that voice? Because words are easy, character is not. And honestly, why do we trust the exterior more than the foundation? Ever regretted believing someone just because they sounded inspiring? Yeah, it happens to the best of us. Crowds love confident people, really love them, even if the confidence is kind of fake. You ever notice how a loud, certain tone makes people think something is true? Why is that? Why do we often agree just because someone sounds sure? Have you ever believed a person simply because their voice felt convincing, and then later you were like, what did they even say? It's strange how tone can overpower meaning. And honestly, if you've ever followed someone just because of confidence, tell me if that felt familiar. I'd actually love to hear if you've seen that around you. The story of Saul in the Bible is, like, the perfect example of all this. Tall, impressive, strong-looking. And everyone assumes strength on the inside, too. Have you noticed how often we do that, judge by the outside? But Saul didn't have the character to carry the role, and it all fell apart. Makes you think, right? How many people today look powerful but are empty inside? And why do appearances fool us so easily? It's something we don't like admitting, but yeah, we fall for it all the time. Saul actually started pretty well, like he didn't look like trouble at first. Ever known someone who seemed solid in the beginning and later you were like, wow, that went the wrong way fast? Character reveals itself slowly. And honestly, that's why it's so dangerous to trust someone based only on first impressions. Have you ever asked yourself where the real depth is? What's beneath the surface? Sometimes everything looks stable until light presses a little, and then everything just falls apart. And it makes you realize charisma and maturity are not the same thing at all. You know, Belfort is kind of like a modern Saul. Bright, loud, full of energy, right? And people just follow him like he's the guy who knows everything. Ever met someone like that? Someone who leads with confidence, but like something inside feels off? Honestly, that inner gap always shows up sooner or later. Why do we ignore the cracks just because the surface shines? It's crazy how many lives get dragged into chaos by someone who looks inspiring on the outside. And you sit there thinking, well, how did nobody see this? But maybe they just didn't want to. The whole thing with Sam Bankman-Fried, it's the same pattern. A leader, a genius, a visionary, and everyone buys into it because he sounds like absolutely certain. Have you noticed how certainty can fool even the smartest people? Why do we keep trusting those who perform confidence instead of those who live with character? And when the fall comes, it's huge, almost surreal. Ever followed a story like that and thought, right, we've seen this before? If you've ever seen a leader fall like that, it almost makes you wonder why we still fall for the same personality types every time. It's kind of heartbreaking and kind of predictable at the same time. The scariest part is that leaders like this always promise big things. They paint huge visions, you know. They speak in a way that makes you feel like anything is possible. But have you ever realized how dangerous inspiration can be when it's not backed by wisdom? Why do we love speeches more than substance? Ever walked away from someone and thought, well, that sounded amazing, but what did it actually mean? And honestly, we all get swept up in that feeling sometimes. It's just so easy to fall for excitement when you're not grounding yourself in truth. Happens to everyone sooner or later. A leader without depth always, leads people toward destruction. Maybe slowly, maybe quietly, but eventually it shows. You ever seen someone guide others the wrong way while sounding completely right? And people don't even notice until the damage is already done. Why are we so drawn to success that we forget to check the foundation? Ever mistaken charisma for calling? I mean, it's a scary mix. Because once people admire someone, they stop questioning him. And honestly, that's how whole groups fall without even realizing it. A lot of people build success way faster than they build character. And character is the thing that actually holds everything together. You ever felt like God was shaping you on the inside while life around you felt slow? Ever wondered why growth takes time? Maybe because without a foundation, success could crush you. And have you ever asked yourself whether you're chasing achievements or actually becoming someone solid? It's kind of wild how we want shortcuts, but character never grows through shortcuts. And honestly, we all learned that the hard way. So, this is where the real question hits. Are you building character or just success? Who shapes your heart right now? Someone mature or someone just loud and impressive? Ever felt that difference? It's huge. And maybe the scariest part is how often we let the wrong people influence us without noticing. Why do we overlook the people who actually have depth? And what happens if we keep choosing charisma over character? Sometimes one honest moment right here changes everything. If we let it. You know, I keep thinking about how sin never shows up looking scary. It always kind of shows up smiling, soft, harmless. Have you noticed that? Like everything feels normal, nothing dangerous around. And then suddenly it starts taking the most precious thing you have. Why does it always work like that? Why does the destruction start so quietly? And why is it the home that gets hit first? I mean, isn't it strange how one tiny compromise can end up shaking the whole foundation? Ever look back at something and thought, well, how did things fall apart so fast? It's almost unreal when you think about it. In the movie, you can see it so clearly. Belfort laughs, lives wild, enjoys everything like it's all one big holiday. And at first it looks harmless, right? Did you ever notice how people convince themselves nothing bad will follow? But then the deeper he goes, the faster his family starts breaking. Why is it always the family that takes the first hit? Why does sin go straight for the tender places? You know, it's like a pattern you can see in every era. And still, we act like we're the exception. His daughter, that little girl, she's like the silent reminder of the damage. A child who didn't choose any of it, but she feels the pain the most. You ever seen something like that in real life? When a kid just watches quietly and your heart like splits in half? Why do children have to pay for choices they never made? Why do we forget how much they absorb even when they don't say a word? And honestly, her silence in the movie hits harder than any loud scene. It's like sin never stays inside one person. It spreads. Sin never affects just one person. It always touches everyone around them. You notice that? One person falls and suddenly the crack runs through the whole family. Why don't we think about that when we make choices? Why do we keep believing we can protect people while walking the wrong way ourselves? I mean, can we really protect anyone like that? Ever seen a home that looked fine from the outside but was already splitting on the inside? And honestly, if you've seen that around you, you can tell me, because those stories really stay with people. Sometimes hearing them helps others wake up too. I keep thinking about Adam, he didn't just lose the garden, he lost responsibility. Ever thought about that? That the fall first broke the role of the man as a protector? And when a man loses that sense of responsibility, the whole home starts collapsing automatically. Have you seen that? When the house is still standing, but the atmosphere inside is already broken? Why does sin strike men first in their calling? It's something we still see today, right? And we don't like talking about it, but we should. I've seen families where the man stepped into sin and the whole house started like cracking slowly. At first it looked tiny, almost nothing, like a mood shift, a little distance. Have you ever seen that? Then the kids start asking questions. Then the wife looks tired in a way you can't hide. And after a while you realize the heart of the home is just dimming. Why do people think they can hide that from their family? Why do they think it won't spill over? And honestly, sometimes you can see the ending long before they do. Belfort didn't lose his family in some huge dramatic moment. It was like these tiny little steps he probably didn't even notice. Ever felt that? When something dangerous starts so quietly, you kind of don't take it seriously. And you're like, yeah, it's fine. It's just once. And then once becomes twice. And twice becomes, well, a direction you never meant to take. Why do the smallest choices pull us the farthest? Ever looked back and thought, how did I even get here? It's weird, right? The edge never looks like the edge until you're already slipping. And honestly, that slow drift scares me more than any big fall. So someone told me recently about a guy who went through almost the same thing. And it all sounded so small at first, like he kept saying he was tired or needed space, those soft little excuses that don't sound dangerous at all. Ever heard someone talk like that? And then he started coming home later and later. And, well, one day the house was just empty. His wife left. And he stood there kind of shocked, like it came out of nowhere. Why do we ignore the signs we create ourselves? Why do we pretend the drift isn't a drift? Honestly, it's almost painful how predictable the end can be. Kids, they remember everything, even when they're totally silent. Ever seen that quiet look in a kid's eyes when something falls apart at home? It hits you harder than words ever could. Why do we pretend they don't feel it? Like, why do adults think children don't understand? They understand way more than anyone admits. It's kind of heartbreaking how their little hearts soak up everything. The tension, the distance, the coldness. Ever seen a child watch adults break something that should have protected them? Honestly, that's the part of sin no one talks about enough. Sin always feels personal at first, like it's your thing, something no one else will ever deal with. You ever thought like that? But then the home pays the price. The marriage pays the price. The peace in the house, gone. And for what? These small, so-called harmless choices? Why do we believe they won't echo? Why do we trust that lie every single time? It's strange how we think consequences won't reach us, right? Honestly, it's one of the cruelest illusions won't reach us, right? Honestly, it's one of the cruelest illusions we fall for. There are choices that slowly tear a home apart, brick by brick, and you don't even see it happening. You know that feeling? When everything looks normal on the outside, but inside the walls are already cracking, and the person still keeps saying, I've got this under control. But do they really? I mean, can control even exist in a place where sin already got a foothold? Why do people cling to self-deception like it's going to save them? Ever watch someone hold on to the very thing that's drowning them? And honestly, the longer they hold on, the harder the fall becomes. So, what are you putting at risk right now? Ever asked yourself that? Your home, your marriage, your kids, your peace inside? Why do we wait until everything starts shaking before we stop and think? Why don't we ask these questions sooner when there's still time? You ever felt that tiny nudge inside saying, hey, something's not right? I mean, ignoring that nudge is what starts the whole collapse. And honestly, maybe right now is the moment to breathe and look around, because the price, it's always higher than we ever expect. You know, I keep thinking about how we all treat falling as this final thing, as if once you fall, that's it, story over. But is it? Ever had that moment where your brain just goes, well, I ruined everything? And honestly, that's usually the first lie that shows up. The Bible literally says a righteous person falls 7 times and gets up. 7 times. Why would God say that if falling meant the end? Maybe the real question isn't, did you fall? But do you want to get back up? And that kind of changes everything, right? Because standing up sometimes says more about you than falling ever did. In the movie, Belfort falls hard, painfully hard, but he doesn't even try to turn around. You notice that? He just keeps going deeper instead of looking up. Why do people do that? Why repeat the same choices that already broke you? Ever caught yourself doing something similar, even in small ways? Like thinking, well, I'm already here, so whatever. But what if he had stopped? What if getting up could have completely changed the ending? Honestly, falling doesn't destroy a person. Staying down does. I mean, have you noticed how God never shuts the door first? He just waits. Patiently, quietly. You ever felt that little nudge inside, hey, you can still come back? Why do so many people think God gave up on them? Where does that idea even come from? Ever been in a moment where you thought you messed up too much, and then somehow grace still found you? It's kind of wild when you think about it. And honestly, if you've ever had that moment where God pulled you back when you thought you were gone, I'd actually love to hear it, because those stories really help people breathe again. Peter, wow, he didn't just fall, he crashed. He denied Jesus 3 times in front of people in the hardest moment. Can you imagine carrying that weight? Ever done something you felt was just too big to forgive? And yet Jesus didn't push him away. He restored him. He trusted him again. Why? Because falling wasn't the end for Peter, and it doesn't have to be the end for you either. Think about it. If a man who denied Christ himself came back, then what exactly is too big for God to restore in your life? Ever wondered that? Why do we believe our failures are stronger than God's mercy? Isn't that kind of strange? Like we make our mistakes into giants, and for God they're moments. Moments he can heal. Moments he can rewrite. Ever felt like maybe you went too far? Honestly, you didn't. Not even close. Falling always whispers this lie that everything is over. You know that feeling? Like your mind jumps straight to the darkest ending possible. And you're just sitting there thinking, well, maybe this is it. But is it? Isn't it weird how fear exaggerates everything? Ever looked back later and thought, wow, that wasn't the end at all? Falling isn't a grave. It's a crossroads. And the direction you choose afterward matters way more than the fall itself. That's the part we forget. You ever met someone who talks like there's just no way back for them? Like they already decided the door is closed? And honestly, it's heartbreaking because you can kind of feel the pain behind those words. But why do we believe that? Who made us think God can't rebuild what we broke? The Bible is full of people who fell way harder than we ever did and still got restored. It's everywhere, you know? Story after story. So why do we trust our shame more than his mercy? It makes no sense. God specializes in making new beginnings out of broken pieces, which means, yeah, your story is definitely not over. So, someone once told me about a man who fell so deep it looked like impossible to climb back up. And at first, nothing changed. He felt empty, ashamed, kind of numb. You ever been in that place where even praying feels too heavy? But then he started whispering these tiny prayers, not loud, not perfect, just honest. And things slowly started shifting. His home changed. His relationship softened. His heart opened again. Why do we underestimate what one small turn toward God can actually do? It's always more powerful than we expect. Yeah, sin destroys. It really does. But have you noticed how God rebuilds faster, stronger, deeper? Ever seen someone after restoration and thought, wow, they're actually better than before the fall? Why does healing sometimes feel more powerful than the breaking ever was? It's kind of beautiful, right? Like God doesn't just fix things, He creates something new out of what we thought was ruined. Ever felt that hope rising inside you? Honestly, if He can rebuild whole lives, He can rebuild whatever cracked in yours too. Falling is never just falling. It's like this moment where life hits pause and says, hey, think about where you're going. You ever felt that? When something goes wrong. But it doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like protection. Like God stopping you before you walk deeper into something dark. Why don't we see falling as a turning point? Why do we treat it like a grave when it's actually a doorway? What if the moment you get up becomes the moment everything new begins? That kind of changes the whole picture, right? God lifts anyone who says, I need help. Anyone. No exceptions. You ever think about how wild that is? We put limits on ourselves, but He never does. Why do we assume He'll reject us when He never rejected the people who fell much worse? Ever wondered how different your life could look if you actually let Him lift you? Honestly, the strongest people in Scripture were the ones who fell and let God raise them again. Maybe strength was never about perfection. Maybe strength was never about perfection. So let me just ask you this, straight from the heart. You fell, but do you actually want to get up? Do you feel that tiny pull inside, like maybe you're ready for a new beginning? Because if even a little part of you says yes, your story is not over, not even close. God meets people exactly in that moment, the moment they choose to stand again. And honestly, if you're still listening right now, something in you is already moving toward the light. If you want to walk through all this together, just stick around, hit subscribe. Let's rise together, step by step.
Don't forget to subscribe.